Hello and welcome back. My name is Nathan House and I am with the Church of Christ in Houston, California. And if you could like or subscribe to this video, that'd be great. We're going to be in Romans chapter 14 today, and we're going to be talking about something that I think is relevant and important in the church today, and that's where do we allow opinions? We all have opinions. And so, how do we as Christians fit opinions of people into our Christian family? As we've been talking about the last few videos, we've been talking about Paul's emphasis on love and caring for one another, going back into Romans chapter 12, 13, and 14. And so we've been talking about this umbrella of love, right? That everything that you do, that all these things Paul has been talking about for one another, this Christian family, Christian responsibility, it's all underneath this umbrella of love, right? There's times we don't always want to act that way, right? Here's this old man and old woman, and you just can't help but wonder, what did she do? You know, she did something. But the old man is still doing what he needs to do. That's a bit of a joke there. But whatever the case, the thing says love is caring for each other even when you're angry, right? Love is not doing what you necessarily feel or want to do. Love is doing what is best for others. And love is sacrificial, right? The kind of biblical love that Jesus Christ, was the example of, that God was the example of, that the apostles frequently call us to, is a sacrificial love. And so we're going to talk today about this umbrella of love and how does that umbrella of love impact what we do when we have a disagreements. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a moment. But here's are some of these verses that kind of just reflect this idea of an umbrella of love, right? Romans 12:9, let love be genuine. Chapter 13, verse 10, love does no wrong to a neighbor. Therefore, love is the fulfilling of the law. Chapter 14, which we'll see today, for if your brother is grieved by what you eat, you are no longer walking in love. And so today we're going to see, I'll toss this on the screen and just you can kind of look at this and kind of contemplate some of these words. I've tried to highlight some key words, important words, and they're not necessarily just words that keep repeating, but they're key in how they're used. So we have this idea of somebody who is weak, right? Down here, weak, down towards the end, it talks about someone that's failings. And so how does a strong Christian, I'm going to slide myself over here for a minute, because if you look at chapter 15, verse 1, we who are strong. How does a strong Christian act when he has a different opinion with a weak Christian? And what is the responsibility that a strong Christian has towards a weak Christian? What about a weak Christian's responsibility? So really, this is talking about opinions, and it's very important that we understand what an opinion is. And an opinion is something where we don't have clear biblical directive, clear biblical authority, right? This is something that is not laid out perfectly clear in scripture. So we come to something and here's, these questions, and how do we deal with them? And a lot of times there's principles to guide us in some of these opinions, but we're still left with having an opinion. And when our opinion is different than somebody else's, how are we going to respond to that? What's a Christian's role? What's a Christian's responsibility? And so again, this all comes underneath this umbrella of love. And so you can notice here, a Christian's responsibility. We don't want to cause someone to stumble. We see that word there in the green. The words here in yellow all come from this Greek root word krino, meaning to judge, to condemn. And a lot of this times, this idea of passing judgment probably better translated as condemning, right? Because they were condemning each other based off of a different of opinion. Well, what were some of the opinions that Paul's going to deal with? Well, he's going to talk about, if you look in the light blue, things that you eat, food, right? So he's going to talk about there's different opinions in the church in Rome 2,000 years ago about food. There was different opinions looking here at the red. There was different opinions as to days, holidays. Probably the idea here is, and we'll talk more about this in a minute, holidays that maybe the Jews were celebrating. And so, how do we as Christians navigate through opinions? And so that's going to be kind of what we talk about today. So let's go ahead and get into this real quickly. And so chapter 14, verse 1, it says here in verse 1, it says, I lost my note, my train of thought here. It says in verse 1, for as for the one who is weak in faith, welcome him, but not to quarrel over, and again, we have to keep this in context. Quarrel over what? Over opinions. That's what Paul is focusing on in this chapter. He is focusing on areas of opinion. Where can we have an opinion? What if we have an opinion that's different than somebody else's? So Paul says, Again, as for the one who is weak in faith, welcome him. So who is he talking to? Who is the one that is expected to welcome him? Well, I think here he's talking about the stronger Christians. Welcome him, but not to quarrel. And that is that Greek word there, that krino word for judging, to condemn, not to have this judgmental attitude over, and again, I know I'm emphasizing this again, but over what? Over opinions. What opinions will Paul address? Specifically, I already kind of alluded to this. He's going to address food. He's going to address days, and he addresses wine. Kind of in passing, he addresses wine. But the food aspect, what is this? Well, we don't really know exactly what food aspect Paul's talking about. There was a lot of paganism in the ancient city of Rome, just like there was in the church in Corinth, the ancient city of Corinth. And we know that Paul had a lot to say to the church in Corinth about food offered to idols. So perhaps that's what's in consideration here. Should you eat food offered to idols or not? Or perhaps the food under consideration is, the Jews coming out of Judaism, they didn't eat some meats. They avoided some meats. And so perhaps the idea here is, meat offered, meat that was consumed by Gentiles, that maybe the Jews were struggling with this. Yes, God has made all foods clear. I can now eat pork or whatever, but that's a long time of habit and practice. So there was obviously some sort of a question about food and exactly the nature of that. We can't be too sure about, but whatever the case, it was an opinion. There was questions about days, holidays, probably, Sabbath, Passover, perhaps some other things that were pagan holidays. Whatever the case, there was questions about days. And he also includes in kind of in passing, but it's included in this chapter of opinions, the consumption of wine. Now, this is an opinion, right? This is my opinion. My opinion is I don't drink. My wife and I teach our kids not to drink. I don't think it is wise for a Christian to drink. However, that is my opinion. I think there are some principles. Backtrack. I don't think there are some principles that guide the drinking of alcohol. But nevertheless, Paul puts this on this list in Romans 14. Apparently, there is room for some discussion and opinions on the drinking of wine. So I'm not going to do a lesson on alcohol right now. I've done those before. Nevertheless, if someone wants to talk to me about it, I'm happy to do that. But so we have chapter 14, verse 1, how this whole discussion starts. As for the one who is weak in faith, welcome him, not to quarrel over opinions. As he kind of ends this, right, going to the very beginning of chapter 15, we have this: we who are strong. So we have weak, we have strong. We who are strong have an obligation. That is a strong word, isn't it? We have an obligation to bear. The word bear here means to help carry the load, to help pick up something, we have an obligation to help carry the load with the failings. So this is again from that same word for which we get weak. We have an obligation to bear with the failings of, I know it might be a little confusing, but this is kind of tied to the same word, but the idea is the same. We have an obligation to deal with the failings of those who are not strong and not to please ourselves. So two infinitive verbs here in chapter 15, verse 1. What are the two infinitive verbs that Paul is saying the strong should be doing? Helping the weak. Number one, bearing with the failings of the weak. And the second thing is not to please ourselves. We'll have more to say about that in just a moment. Chapter 14, verse 1, I want to tie this into verse 3 as well. Notice here this word, again, welcome. As for the one who is weak in the faith, welcome him. We come down to verse 3. It says, let not the one who eats despise the one who abstains, and let not the one who abstains pass judgment or condemn, right? Let not the one who abstains, right? He's not eating the meat. Maybe, and again, not sure exactly the nature of this discussion, but perhaps the idea of the temple and the sacrificing of meat in the temples. So perhaps you're a Gentile, and again, making this scenario up, but perhaps you're a Gentile coming out of paganism. You used to participate in the sacrifices in the pagan temples. You used to participate in the fornication and the sexual immorality at this temple celebration. And so you were a part of the sacrifice, this feasting, just like in 1 Corinthians 8 and in chapter 10. And so perhaps now that you're a Christian, you come to the market and you see the meat there and you say, I can't eat that meat. I remember participating in these immoral things as I ate this meat, and my convictions is that I can't do that. And perhaps a Jew comes to the market and says, you know what? Those aren't even real gods. They're nothing. I can eat this meat. It doesn't bother me. So I don't know who was the one offended or who was the one not being offended. And again, I don't know that scenario up. But whatever the case, one is not eating and one is eating. And Paul says, don't condemn the one who eats if you're the one who chooses to not eat. Why should you not? For God has welcomed him. So the strong people, look at what it says, the strong Christians welcome the weak. God has welcomed these people who are making these choices, right? The one who chooses not to eat because it's against his convictions, God has welcomed him. The one who says, I can eat because it doesn't bother me. It doesn't prick my conscience. There's nothing wrong with it. Paul makes it clear there's nothing wrong with it in and of itself. So God has welcomed him. Later on in chapter 15, verse 7, Paul says, therefore, welcome one another. Here's that aspect of family that we just keep seeing pounded in chapters 12 and following. Therefore, welcome one another as Christ welcomed you. So 3 times there's this aspect of being welcomed, right? He tells the stronger Christians, welcome them. He tells them, God has welcomed him. And so who are you? And Christ has welcomed him. So who are you to not welcome, right? Who are you to not welcome these other folks, right? So again, going back to verse 3, 2 things Paul says. Do not despise, right? Don't treat with contempt. And the second thing is stop condemning, but rather welcome one another. And so again, it kind of begs a question. If God has welcomed these individuals who have this opinion, and Christ has welcomed them, shouldn't we welcome them? So the responsibility of the mature Christian is to welcome, right? So then we go on to another verse here. Let's keep going. I'm not going to do the whole chapter. We're going to kind of hit some highlighted some significant verses here along the way, though. Verse 7, but none of us lives to himself. None of us dies to himself. For if we live to the Lord. If we die to the Lord. So then whether we live or whether we die, we are the Lord's. We are not an island unto ourselves. Right? We're not an island unto ourselves. Back here, what we saw, let me see if I can throw this up here on the screen again. Look at what he said. We already looked at this verse. We are not trying to be people that are trying to please ourselves. Christianity is not, this is a shock for some people, but Christianity is not about you. It is about the Christian family. It is about God. It is about the Lord. We have to be willing to sacrifice, not, chapter 15, verse 1, not to please ourselves. We're not living here to himself. It's not about us. So we don't live for ourselves. So we have this repeated idea. And it actually, I'm going to throw this on the screen. It actually goes back into chapter 14, verse 6 as well. So the one who observes the day, so he brings up the idea of a holiday again. The one who observes the day, he observes it, watch this, in honor of the Lord. The one who eats in honor of the Lord. 2 different things. One is observing the day, one isn't. One who's eating, one doesn't. But whatever they're doing, they're both doing it in honor of the Lord. The one who abstains in honor of the Lord and gives thanks to God. None of us lives to himself. Verse 8, if we live to the Lord. If we die to the Lord. So then whether we live or whether we die, we are the Lord's. So there is this repeated idea in Romans 14 about living for the Lord. It's not about yourself. It is not about you. It is about, verse 6, honoring the Lord with what we do. Living for the Lord, verse 8. Dying to the Lord, verse 8. We are the Lord's, verse 8. We're not an island unto ourselves. And when we as Christians have opinions and when we disagree with people, how do we handle that? What are we going to do? Are we going to be people that look down, condemn, despise those who have a different opinion? Or are we going to welcome them? Let's hop down here to verse 4. He says, what we're going to tie verse 4 and verse 10 together. Who are you to pass judgment on the servant of another? It is before his own master that he stands or falls. Look at this beginning of this question. Who are you to condemn? If God is welcomed, if Christ is welcomed, who are you to condemn? Man, that's a powerful question, I think. Who are you? Who are you to condemn them? Verse 10, why do you pass judgment? They will stand before the judgment seat of God. So 2 points here. Number 1, you're not the judge, verse 10. Number 2, you're not their master, verse 4. So why do we sometimes fall into this trap? And I will say this, I think this is an area that many mature Christians, to their shame, struggle in. Perhaps myself too at times, I don't know. But perhaps I have struggled with the same thing, that I have fallen under this trap of condemning. But these aren't, I'm not their master. I'm not the judge. And if God is welcomed and Christ is welcomed, who am I to pass judgment? Who am I to condemn? In matters of opinion, and again, I keep trying to hammer that word. In matters of opinion, does your opinion matter more? Does your opinion give the right to condemn? Let's hop down here to verse 13. Therefore, so we have, and a lot of times when you see this, let us, this is what we call an auditory subjunctive, and kind of an interesting verb in the Greek, and it acts like a command, so it kind of acts like an imperative verb. And so we see this let us here. Therefore, let us what? Two things. Not pass judgment or not condemn anymore. So obviously this was a problem, right? Don't condemn one another any longer. It wasn't just Paul was, hey, maybe this will be a problem. It was a problem. Let us not condemn anymore, but rather, so let us do what? Not condemn, and let us decide, make this judgment, right? So there's that same Greek word tied there with that yellow. Let us make this judgment never to put a stumbling block or a hindrance in any way of a brother. This is about our example causing someone to stumble. This is about the choices we make, where we perhaps persuade somebody to do what we are doing, even though it's against their convictions. Let's skip down here to verse 15. This is a reminder of this umbrella of love. For if your brother is grieved, and this is a word that means they're hurt by it, right? For if your brother is grieved by what you eat, you are no longer walking in love by what you eat. Do not destroy the one for whom Christ died. So again, there is this reminder that we are to walk in love. And what does a walk in love look like? It's sacrificial. It's selfless, right? Go all the way back here to that very first verse, or one of the very first slides we looked at. It's not about pleasing ourselves, right? So a walk in love is a walk that is sacrificial and selfless. It's like, holidays, Christmas is coming up. We're here in November, so another month away or so, right? And so you have people that say, I don't know when Jesus was born, so I don't celebrate Christmas. Is that their opinion? Is that their right to have that opinion? Absolutely. What about someone who says, I don't know when Christ was born, nevertheless, I want to celebrate his birth? Is there room for that opinion in the church? Absolutely. What about someone who says, I don't know when Christ was born. So all three people are coming from the same beginning point. I don't know when Christ was born. One of them says, because I won't celebrate anything. One of them says, I don't know, but I still want to celebrate his birth. Maybe another person says, I don't know when Christ was born, and so I celebrate this holiday as a family holiday, not a religious holiday. But the point is there room for opinions on all of this? If I'm not trying to force you to, I don't believe you should celebrate Christmas, so I'm going to try to force you to stop. Or I'm going to try to force you to participate. If I'm a Jew and I'm living in ancient Rome and I think I shouldn't eat pork, I'm not going to despise you if you eat pork. If I celebrate Passover, I'm not going to condemn you for not celebrating Passover. If I eat pork, I'm not going to try to convince you, this Jewish Christian, that you should eat pork. Let's hop down here to another one. Verse 19, here's another verse. So then, let us, here's another auditory subjunctive. You see that let us there. So let us do what? Pursue what makes for peace. So two things. Pursue what makes for peace, and what else? And for mutual upbuilding. Those are such important ideas. This, rather than condemning and despising, let's try to do what makes for peace and mutual upbuilding. And so we come down here to verse 23. But whoever has doubts, and again, that word krino, that judgment word, condemning word, but whoever in his judgment doesn't think he should do it, right? He doesn't think he should do this. If again, it's against his convictions. He's condemned if he does eat. If he thinks he shouldn't eat, but he goes ahead and eats, because his eating is not from faith. And so this word faith here probably again carries more an idea of convictions, because what he's doing is not from his convictions on what he should do. For whatever does not proceed from our convictions is sin. We're not talking about areas where scriptures are clear. We're talking about opinions. There's all sorts of areas of opinion. Are there areas of opinion regarding clothing? I'm more casual probably in my clothing than a lot of preachers are. Um, is there areas of opinion for clothing? Yeah, I think so. Are there some principles that should guide our clothing? Yeah, there's principles, right? We need to be modest in our dress. So there are some principles. What about dancing? This one again, a hot topic sometimes. Are there rooms for opinions in dancing? Are there some kind of dancing that's absolutely inappropriate? Absolutely. So there's some principles that should guide what kind of dancing is allowed or not allowed, or a Christian should or shouldn't participate in. Things that are sexual and immoral and inappropriate. But if I'm foursquare dancing and I'm not doing anything sexual or inappropriate, if I dance a slow dance with my wife, is all dancing the same? Are there opinions? Can someone think, dancing is wrong? And they're convicted that dancing is wrong, but then someone talks to them and pressures them and berates them and takes them and gets them to go to a club against their convictions, against what they think is right, and they go. Paul says that's sinful because your conviction is saying don't, but you did it anyways. So here we have all of these areas of opinions in Romans 14, and they serve as great illustrations for us as we consider opinions today. And what do we do as Christians? How should we handle them? And so once again, just this reminder, going back to that earlier slide, we who are strong have an obligation to bear with the failings of the weak and not to please ourselves. I thought it was really interesting. Dr. Dan Owen made this comment. He said, custom and divine commands, right? Two different things. Custom, these things that we do, they're part of our tradition, part of our practice. They're custom, and there's also divine command. They're not the same thing. And sometimes we confuse, right? Custom and divine commands should not be confused, but sometimes we confuse them. People who have long-standing practices, people who have long-standing customs, often confuse their customs with divine commands. I think those are very wise words and a great warning for us that let's be careful not to confuse customs, long-standing practices, opinions with divine commands. Rather, let's be people who stop condemning others about opinions, right? Who are you to condemn? Why do you condemn? Let's not condemn people about opinions. Let us be people that don't cause people to stumble by pressuring them or berating them. Let's not be people that do that. Let us be people that do what? Let us, so here's that again, auditory subjunctive, right? Let us pursue what makes for peace and for mutual encouragement. And finally, let us pick up the burden of the weak, and let us realize that this Christian walk, when it comes to areas of opinion, we need to help each other, not cause others to stumble. Let's be patient, let's be loving, let's be kind, and let's remember that all of this falls underneath this umbrella of love. Back to verse 15, right? Let's walk in love towards one another. In areas of opinion, in areas where we have this freedom to make choices, let's be patient and kind. And let's bear with each other and not be so worried about our own rights and pleasing ourselves. You have a great day. God bless.